Number 1. Please note that this first story has been verified by the moderators of the subreddit Let's Not Meet, based on evidence submitted by the original poster. When I was a teenager, I was a goth. Black hair, black clothes, black makeup, even had a pair of combat boots. My friends and I, in typical goth fashion, hung out at the local cemetery. We started going there just as a joke, but soon discovered we liked the peace we found there. That all changed one night. My friend called me to see if I wanted to hang out, and I did. None of our other friends were available. They were either working or recovering from partying the night before, so we were on our own. My friend picked me up, and we drove up to the cemetery. We were hanging out, smoking cigs and bullshitting, when we noticed at the top of the hill we were on, about 100 feet away, a bonfire had been lit. You have to understand that this cemetery is about a block off campus of a major university, and it's not uncommon for college students to go there and party. My friend and I sighed, knowing that we would have to get going soon. It was illegal to be in the cemetery after dark, and we knew the police would show up because some jerks have decided they needed a bonfire. We decided to finish our cigarettes and then take off. Just then, the most horrible stench came wafting down the hill from the direction of the bonfire. My friend gagged and covered her mouth. I groaned and said, "What the hell?" My friend shook her head, saying, "I don't know what they're doing. Let's just leave." We get in the car when one of us, and I don't remember who, suggested that maybe we go up and have a look at what they're doing. My stomach turned, and a cold shiver went through my body. My friend must have had the same feeling, because, at the same time, we both said, "No, we should leave." My friend turned the car on, switched on her headlights, put the car in reverse, and looked over her shoulder before starting to back up. I was still looking up the hill. A figure stepped in front of the bonfire. I could only see a silhouette, but I was sure whoever it was watching us. A feeling of terror hit me, and I said, "Go, go, go, go," getting louder and more panicked with each word. My friend looked back up the hill for a second, and just as the figure took a step towards us, she slammed on the gas and peeled out, going in reverse down the hill. She rammed the gearshift into drive, and we were out. We didn't say anything for a while, until she said, "What the hell were they burning?" I shook my head. "I don't know." She dropped me off at my home, and I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up and went out to the kitchen. My mum was there, drinking her morning coffee, and I joined her. We were talking about her job for a bit, when suddenly she comes out with, "Oh, did you hear what happened last night?" She tells me that a woman she once worked with was kidnapped from a parking lot. She then tells me the police were too late. Whoever took her had raped and murdered her. They found her this morning up in the cemetery. He'd tried to dispose of the body in a bonfire. I froze. My brain was going a mile a minute, the realization slowly creeping up on me. That's what that smell was. Needless to say, I never hung out at that cemetery at night again. I think back to our decision to leave instead of investigate the fire. That one decision could have changed everything. Number 2. I'm a karaoke DJ. I usually get home between 2 and 3 a.m, but tonight I got off around 11 because the bar had a power outage. I live alone in a triplex behind a house. I live in the middle of a city, but the property I'm on is rather large, so there is a big backyard behind my apartment. As I was coming home tonight, I noticed that my cats weren't waiting for me in the window. This was strange, because they can hear my van pull into the driveway, and they're always waiting at the window every night, no exception. I thought it was odd. Then, I noticed that my kitchen light was on. I never leave my kitchen light on. At this point, I was a little freaked out. That's when I thought I saw movement in my kitchen. I called 911, and the dispatcher told me to lock my van doors and remain in the vehicle and stay on the line. The officers showed up very quickly, probably in less than 5 minutes. They parked on the street and walked up to my van. They asked me to stay quiet and give them my house key. One officer went to the back of my apartment, and the other used my key to unlock the door. When he opened the door, all was quiet. Then he yelled really loud, telling someone to come out. Then I hear the police officer in the backyard start yelling, and the other officer ran out to join him. My neighbours had come out at this point, and I was freaking out. It seemed like a long wait, but eventually they walked a cuffed woman towards me, and it turns out it was a patron that I had 86'd or kicked out last weekend. I don't know how she found out where I lived. She was hiding in my bedroom closet with a very large knife and a bundle of rope. I don't want to think of what would have happened if I had gone to bed with her waiting for me. I'll be taking a gun safety course soon. Honestly, before I found this subreddit, I wouldn't have noticed all the little things that were out of the ordinary tonight. Hearing these stories has taught me to be more observant. Number 3. This encounter happened to my mum when she was in middle school in the early 1970s. Her family lived outside of town, so she rode the bus to and from school. She was in the 6th grade and had a quote-unquote boyfriend who also rode on the same bus. They would sit together and hold hands, but they weren't inappropriate. The bus driver took notice of their relationship and started to make comments to them. He'd ask if they kissed a lot, if they tongued. Once, he even asked him if he sniffed her underwear. Not really knowing what to do, they did their best to just ignore him. On the last day of school, the bus route went as usual, except that the driver skipped my mum's stop. When he stopped at the next house, several miles away, she tried to get off the bus. The driver stopped her and made her go and sit back down. Every stop after that, she tried to get off the bus, and he'd tell her to go and sit back down, until she was the last one left on the bus. She tells me that she doesn't remember if she was praying out loud or not, but she remembers just begging for an idea of how to get away. The driver told her to move to the front of the bus, right behind his seat. Instead, she picked up her things and moved to the very last seat. On her way, she set her books and things in the middle of the aisle, hoping that if he came after her, he would at least be slowed down. He finally started back down her road towards her house, but turned off onto a dirt road leading back to some brush. She finally decided that if he even slowed down enough, she was going to go out the back emergency door and run for it. As he turned onto another dirt road deeper into the brush, she happened to glance out the back window to see her dad and her older brother, who was also an adult, in their truck, following behind. She shouted up to the driver, "You better stop this bus right now. That's my dad behind the bus." He stopped the bus and opened the doors for her to get off, but she was too scared to even move. Within a few seconds, her dad was on the bus, standing right up next to the driver, so that she could walk around behind him. He told her to go and get in the truck with her brother. As she sat there in the truck, she could see her dad through the back of the window of the bus, just going off on this guy, only verbally, unfortunately. When her dad got back into the truck, he hugged her like never before, and she started crying. She knew that if her dad was scared, that she had just escaped with her life. Now, this wasn't just a coincidence that her dad had found her. Every kid who got off of that bus after they missed my mum's stop had gone home and told their parents that the driver wouldn't let her off the bus and that she was really scared and crying. Their parents then called my grandparents to let them know the stories they were getting. My grandparents never reported the incident to the police or the school, but they did talk to the owner of the bus company, and they never saw that guy driving again. My mum believes that they didn't report it to the police because her dad had threatened the driver's life, and he would in turn report that to the police. We'll never know for sure because my grandfather went to his grave without ever revealing what he said to that driver. Several years later, my mum was talking with her mother-in-law, Grandma C, about Grandma C's cousin who was married to a guy from my mum's hometown. Grandma C was telling her that this guy was in prison for impregnating his 14-year-old stepdaughter. As an off-the-cuff remark, she mentioned that he used to drive a school bus in the district where my mum went to school. My mum almost passed out at this news. She asked his name and was given the name of the bus driver who abducted her all those years ago. I know, I feel the same way, that they should have reported something to the police and had him arrested long before he found another potential victim. I believe they made a mistake in that regard. I'm glad that the perp ended up in prison though. Number 4. A little backstory before we get into things. I grew up in upstate New York, about 30 minutes north of Syracuse to be exact. It only made sense that I would return to my quiet little part of the world after I got out of the Marines in 2007. The only problem is that I didn't have much money. The good news was that my grandfather had an old pull-behind camper van that he told me I could have until I got on my feet. So, being on my own, I decided that I would spend about a year in the pull-behind on a few acres of woods that I had bought from a friend while in the Marines. Taxes had been paid for the year, so the only thing I had to do was pay for gas and propane. I managed to avoid looking like a crazy mountain man by showering and washing my clothes at the local truck stop/diner. I even got a pretty decent job working security. I filled the rest of my time working odd jobs for extra cash. Alright, now on to the main story. It was mid-April, and I was sitting next to a nice low fire while listening to my battery-powered radio and watching nightfall in the woods. I'd gotten a nice dinner at the diner down the road, and I didn't have any work for the next couple of days. Generally, I wouldn't see people in the woods for weeks at a time, so I wasn't expecting it when I heard a scream break the silence. I shot up, and I grabbed my shotgun out of the small camper, and I checked the chamber to make sure it was loaded. I stood at the edge of a small clearing, and I strained my ears to listen for any new sounds. It's generally hard to pinpoint the direction of noise out in the middle of the woods at night. Luckily, I heard some shouting and car doors slamming, so I knew that the sounds had to be coming from a main vehicle trail a short distance from my campsite. I made my way to the trail as fast as I could in the low light, and before I could even get halfway there, I heard another clipped scream to my left. I could hear rustling in the brush, and I slowly made my way over to where I thought the noise was coming from. I came out of the woods right next to a man who had a woman pinned to the ground, and another leering man standing just behind him. Shaking from adrenaline, I leveled the shotgun at the guy on top of the woman, and I growled at him to get off. Now, I'm a big guy, but I have no doubt that the shotgun was the deciding factor in this whole situation. Each of these guys easily had a solid 30 pounds of muscle on me, and I was a 200-pound Marine. I ushered the two idiots back, so that I was between them and the woman, who was now getting to her feet. It was about now I realized we had another problem. My cell phone was cheap and didn't get reception in the woods. Hers had been broken by these two sickos. There wasn't much I could do, other than march these two back to their shitty lifted Jeep under threat of shotgun. I got their license plate number, names, which I'm sure were fake, and a description of them and their vehicle. Before the driver got into the vehicle, I lowered the shotgun to his crotch, and I made sure he understood what a 3-inch 12-gauge shell loaded with buckshot can do to a man's genitals. They took off in one direction, and me and the woman made our way back to my campsite. We drove to the DEC station as soon as possible and reported the entire incident. It turns out that the guy that I hadn't threatened was the young woman's now ex-boyfriend. They had all been out having a few drinks when the third wheel in the situation got a little too handsy for her liking. It turns out that the guy I hadn't threatened was the young woman's now ex-boyfriend. They had all been out having a few drinks when the third wheel in the situation got a little too handsy for her liking. When she said something to her boyfriend, he basically told her to stop being so stuck up and to put out for once. When she refused, the boyfriend took her phone and smashed it on the ground. They both then pushed her into the truck and drove her deeper into the woods. She had waited for them to become complacent before throwing the back door open and jumping out of the Jeep and taking off. Luckily, the Jeep was a pile of shit and the back door didn't lock. It was also a stroke of luck that I happened to be outside when she managed to escape. Fast forward about 7 months, and that woman I helped became my wife, and we moved into our first house using the money I had saved living in the woods. We've been married for 8 years now, and have 2 kids, a 6-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. I still go out to the same camp every year to hunt, and I haven't seen the Jeep or the potential rapists since. We heard through the grapevine that they had been arrested, but somehow got off without any actual jail time. I'm assuming they either moved into the city or further away, because we haven't seen them again. So, to the 2 potential rapists in the Jeep, I know who you are, and for your sake, I hope we never meet again. Update. I've received a few questions about how things went between me and my wife after the incident. Well, at first, she was a little creeped out by my lifestyle. You know, the big scary guy living in a pool behind the woods. But I explained to her that it was just because I needed a bit of quiet and that I was saving up money, and she understood. She let me drive her to urgent care to get checked out, and we spent about 4 or 5 hours talking in the waiting room. That's probably the only time I've ever enjoyed sitting in a damn waiting room. She was okay, just a nasty bump on the head, but it gave us some time to talk. It might be a little classless, but I asked for her number afterwards, and our first date was dinner at her parents' house. After that, things just kind of steamrolled, and I couldn't help but pop the question after only 3 months. As far as that shotgun goes, it's sitting in the gun safe as we speak. We call it the matchmaker. Hello guys, Lazy Masquerade here, and thank you very much for listening to these stories. I really hope you enjoyed them. And seeing as so many of you are going back to school recently, I thought I had to include at least one back to school sort of horror story in there. And then I thought back to it, and I think school itself was kind of a horror story. So many awkward memories. Anyway, make sure to check out the artwork that Anthony has provided in the links below in the description. He's an extremely talented artist, guys. He provides me with all the thumbnails for these videos, so as you can tell, he's very, very talented and he is extremely professional. And, you know, show him some love, follow the links, and let him know what you think of his art. I'll have another video ready for you guys very, very soon. And until then, guys, stay spooky. And as always, remember, the best things happen in the dark.